Well, here we are for the month ahead for June. And of course, everyone is sitting on tenterhooks, waiting to see what kind of coalition agreements are going to be reached now that the election is done, the results are out, and everyone knows more or less where everyone stands. So it must be said, of course, that astrology is not some kind of a psychic art. There isn't a way in astrology to actually determine who the government would go into, uh, to determine who the ANC would go into coalition with or anything like that. There's only the possibility of making certain deductions from looking at what's going on in the chart. And those are only deductions and probabilities. So, like I said last month, um, any ideas I might have about who the ANC goes into coalition with are really just my assumptions and deductions and biases. It's not pure astrology. What the astrology can show and does show is the critical kind of dire state that we're in this post-election phase, where certainly, as we all know, there's lots of optimism mixed with lots of anxiety, and that is well reflected in the chart, which looks very unstable. So it needs to be said that the general process for the rest of the month is something that's very unstable, and that can even be beyond the 2 week period that is the period in which the coalitions are decided. When I look at the charts, I still expect that it's the EFF that the ANC is most likely to go into coalition with. I mean, yes, of course, the EFF on their own can't bring the ANC over the 50% mark, but they just need one or two other parties to help them with that. And they've probably already got the good party where it's entirely possible that they'll say to Patricia de Lille, you can keep your cabinet post if you enter the coalition with your one seat. They just need two seats after the EFF to get them to the 50% mark. So they can go with good parties still giving them one seat, gets two seats from someone else, and they're over the 50% mark. So it seems possible. But of course, in some senses, it's still anybody's game. One thing we can try and do is see, using astrological tools, is there a meeting between the ANC and the official opposition? Because official opposition can be defined in astrology, even though different parties can't easily be defined other than that. Since the DA is the official opposition, we can look and see what are the likelihoods of the ANC going to coalition with them. And the likelihood looks very small. It looks like it's very hard for them to meet. So, as much as they might even want to or try, the issue appears to be almost impossible for anyone to meet or see eye to eye in any kind of way. It doesn't really look very much like that's likely to happen. When it comes, though, to the EFF, it looks more likely to happen because there it's defined in the chart more like the ANC meeting relatively peaceably with its enemies. So if we describe enemies as people who've broken away from it, that is EFF and MK. Well, for more reasons than just astrology, I don't suspect that the coalition would be with the MK party. And also, it's not looking so great for the MK party, interestingly enough. That doesn't mean they can't cause a lot of trouble along the way to might be imploding or disintegrating or something like that. It does look like part of the instability we're talking about could be violence or could be other forms of social unrest that remain very possible all throughout much of the rest of this month of June. So the instability there also reminds us, of course, that the population, the majority of people would not be happy with an ANC-DA coalition. And we know that the ANC, like most political parties, always acts with its own interests first. It does not act with the interests of the country at first. Even Cyril Ramaphosa has said on more than one occasion, essentially, that he puts party before country. There's no reason to expect that politicians are suddenly going to change that. As dire as the situation is, the ANC is much more concerned with its own survival as a result of these elections than anything that might be happening in the country. So for its own survival, it knows can't go into a coalition with the DA, and that's why we see no kind of meeting ground between the government and the official opposition in the chart, whereas we can see a very uneasy meeting ground with the enemy, which we're just going to define as the breakaways as terms of enemy, the other who's causing trouble. Um, and things do look a little bit challenging for the EFF as well. So the EFF might be willing to make more concessions because astrologically in their chart, it looks like what a lot of this period is about is for them is about facing some realities. Although there are very clear reasons why the EFF and the ANC lost support, and that reason is the MK party, it is also causing the EFF to have some self-reflection. Um, they are capable of that. ANC somewhat capable of that. MK Party probably not capable of that. And so we do see that the shifts that are happening in the EFF as they self-reflect could, in the long term, benefit them, whereas the same is not true in Zuma's MK party. I mean, for Zuma himself, it's not looking great. I think things will catch up with him more and more, both legal things and possibly other problems that might be occurring within that party or within the organization of that party. And Zuma's propensity for violence talk and violence is still very evident both in his chart and the chart of the MK party. But much of that will also turn on itself. So that's why there's a lot of instability still, unfortunately, for KZN, but also for the MK party and Zuma himself. And that will be over the course of the rest of the year as a lot of that falls apart. In Cyril Ramaphosa's chart, things are not looking so great either. And his presidency, as I've said this a number of times, his presidency is severely under threat. And I remain convinced that he won't survive into 2025 as the president of South Africa. He'll survive for now, but it looks that by very late this year, or as the second quarter of next year dawns, there's tremendous crisis. So if he survives November, December 2024, he would still have to face March, April 2025, which doesn't look great for him either. So at the very least, I could say, it looks to me like a year from now, Cyril Ramaphosa isn't the president, but it looks like a lot of that happens around November, December of this year. That itself doesn't tell us who the coalition is with. I suspect that if you went with the DA, his exit from the presidency would probably be a lot sooner in terms of his party, because the issue here is his party, and what the rest of us outside of all of that don't know is that there's much more hostility within the party than is known to us. We know about plenty. We know that half the NEC doesn't support him. We know that there's a very strong distaste in his party for working with the DA. So those things working against him at the moment. But there's more to it than all of that as well. That's the bit that the kind of the rest of us don't know so much about, and that is certainly going to be challenging for him. The big challenge for him is surviving all of that. We also don't know even about his willingness to be president, which we've seen before. His willingness to exit is probably because he's had enough, and because his ability to kind of vaguely wing it has sort of run out right now. It's going to be really hard to do that after coalitions are formed and they have to go ahead with a more convincing government, and they have to be aware that they can't just easily push everything through that they have done for the last 30 years. So that's going to make it very difficult for him because he doesn't really function very actively as a president. As we know, he's quite passive, he's quite stagnant, he's quite talk, not action. All of those characteristics that are frequently said of him are not going to be useful going ahead, where you have the support of momentum and majority that lets you just get away with all of that. So I'm not so surprised to see how unstable his chart is looking. Unfortunately, much of that instability then feeds into the rest of the country. Interestingly, less so for the currency than we might expect. It doesn't mean that the currency is safe if unwanted coalitions, unwanted by the market coalitions happen, because obviously there must be some impact, but better than we would think. So there's at least some ability there for us to survive that. So financially, we're kind of hanging in there, but that's a good sign when everything else looks so shaky. The bigger picture is that in keeping with the general flow of things, government is also moving more towards populism. And populism is pretty much what shows in the chart. So that will very much drive their need to kind of align themselves with the prevailing forces in their world, which have to do with the EFF and the MK succeeding because of populism. Also, because of South Africa's tendency to align itself with countries that other people don't align themselves so easily with, we still have support from the alternative world, the BRICS world, the different kind of allies that we keep that still actually helps some of our foreign affairs department in the chart remain strong. But the conflict with other Western countries might increase a little bit or might expose us to a vulnerability that's likely to be financial. Resources and other things that we depend on from other countries are very challenged, but there will be new sources of that as well. So as much as some of the world doesn't like what happens here, some of the world does like what happens here. And while individually, each of us may or may not like who those people are, the fact remains that it still allows resources to come into the country. That's what the chart is showing. So there will still be access to resources, but a big adjustment with regards to how a lot of that works, which also suggests a big change in how the government is operating in this country. One of the major concerns is the social unrest that I mentioned. That's not only related to MK Party, KZN, not only related to the outcomes of the coalition talks, but in general, the state of things can be very restless in the chart. What does bode well about that part of the chart being highlighted is that it also shows that as the new government goes forward, there will be increased focus on the needs of people, labor, and those kind of disgruntled, appropriately disgruntled groups of people who need to see service delivery. Service delivery is a huge issue in this country. It's a huge problem. It's regularly come up in this chart. If you look back over the past many months, keep on talking about it. It looks like a very critical issue right now in this country, in this chart. So hopefully that's about it all being addressed, but it's really also about the fighting it out as to how those things are going to happen. Whoever the coalition turns out to be with, whether it's the DA or the EFF, or even if it turns out to be someone like the MK, which I just don't think so, the fact remains the situation is still very unstable and shaky in the immediate aftermath of that coalition. And that's the thing that perhaps the chart is trying to teach us, is that the process going forward is a series of learning steps because we haven't been here before. So some people think, oh, yay, if we just make a coalition with the DA, then everything will be stable and lovely. That won't be the case because so many people in the country will revolt against that. And if we go with, oh, the EFF or the MK, it's all very unstable. And that's what the problem is. The fact is that in neither case, as we know, the ANC will find it hard to find anyone to meet eye to eye, but the coalition has to be made. And that's why there's still a lot of instability as we learn and as the step-by-step process happens. Worst case scenario, maybe there's an initial coalition with those parties to the left of the ANC that eventually breaks down and eventually becomes a new coalition with the parties to the right of the ANC. Probably a very possible outcome in terms of what the chart is showing. Immediate coalition still produces a lot of instability, and hopefully in the future we will see some of that becoming more stable, but probably only in 2025 once presidential issues are sorted out. Whatever the coalition may be, we still need to not turn our eyes away and think, okay, yeah, now everything's sorted out. It's a slow process here in this very unstable chart for it to all gradually unfold itself. And that's what we as South Africans perhaps need to commit ourselves to, is that what we've learned from this election is that there's a whole bunch of new work to be done. And hopefully that new work will get us to the better outcome that is possible as a result of all of these changes. But to accept that there might be some difficult steps and stages along the way in order to get there. It's not just the magic of let's sign a coalition and everything's done. So if we understand that that is the process, whatever the coalition may be, we can accept whatever the outcome of the coalition talks are more readily and understand that we're still working towards something, and the next new South Africa probably only becomes apparent during 2025. So let's hang in there and do the work that needs to be done. Maybe the symbolism of the coalition is really about us all learning to talk to each other again, as we did in the early 90s when we formed our first version of working together. Let's see what's happening for us in our science. Aries, your month is all about being patient, the month of learning to sit calmly and quietly, but not inactively. In fact, this is a great month for your own kind of partnerships and coalitions to happen, even though, as ever, you like to do things on your own and do things best yourself. And if that is your situation, that's still going to be great. But where you need to engage with others, this is where you need to go carefully and not over assert yourself. That's a general lesson for your month, Aries, is don't push too hard. Don't be over enthusiastic or over aggressive or any of those classically Aries things. Your chart is showing your natural characteristics this month can lead to success, but can also be some of your own downfall, some of your weaknesses, which you can produce all on your own. So no need for that. You're in a strong position. You stand to gain from engagement with other people. It's time to do the talking. Taurus, a change of strategy is required. Things are actually going to work quite well for you. And this is a month where you can really access things that have been difficult to acquire or get through to people that have been difficult to contact. It's like there's some kind of a breakthrough that is making things a lot more accessible to you. But you have to change some strategies in order for that to happen. You can't keep doing what you're doing now. You seem to be a little bit stuck in inertia in that regard. Things might be still happening. You might still be doing your thing, but it's not really getting you anywhere. So the breakthrough needs to happen. Different strategy, look towards different people and different sources, but bigger breakthroughs can happen at this time. Relationships are going to be a little bit more challenging this month than they've been for a while. You need to be listening to, on the one hand, what your partner's saying, but more importantly, be aware of where your own taking things for granted or not looking closely can cause you to be at a disadvantage in your relationships at the moment. So a bit of an adjustment of how you're seeing things is what's needed this month. Gemini, you need a bit of a refresh. Ideally, this is a time when you'll be able to go traveling or making some real big changes in your environment, even moving, whether it's moving home or just traveling to a different place, changing your environment, redecorating and moving the furniture around is the very least you can do. But you really need to shift the space that you're in. The stagnation you're getting into is coming from your environment. And so this is a time to make some changes in that regard. But a holiday is good enough. And it's just that refreshing that your chart is talking about. It's also a time to renegotiate some things in your relationships, a time to do a little bit more talking in all relationships, identify your weaknesses in your relationships, one of the themes this month, and talk things out. That's going to help resolve a lot of potential issues, probably much better outcome than you thought they might have had. Cancerians, Your needs and the things you need to get done are all in the spotlight this month. It's a little bit like the doors are opening up for you. The challenge is going to be with making decisions. It looks like things are equal. The pros and cons are equal, or different things you're looking at. All the pros look as good as all the other pros, and it's going to be hard to decide. So, Cancerians, your lesson for the month is that it doesn't matter what you decide, it matters that you decide, because once you've weighed things up, you will actually have eliminated the things that are not going to work. So trust yourself, trust your gut, your intuition that always works so well for you. That's going to really work well for you in terms of knowing what to do decision wise and how to pursue these goals. There's some very important goals on the table at the moment. This is the time to put your foot on the accelerator or get rid of the obstacles and really just go for it. Now's the time to make your own goals happen. Leos kind of need to be spending a bit more time with your friends at the moment. This is not a good time for isolation or excessively burying yourself in all that work. Your chart is looking like it really needs the social input at this time. On the one hand, because friendship and friends are really going to be beneficial for you, but also at a more professional level, engaging with other people is going to be necessary and useful. As we see in everything around us at the moment, coalition talks, you name it, negotiating, talking things out, partnerships. This is what the theme of the month is very much all about for many of the signs, reflecting the bigger picture that's going on in our world. And that certainly is true for you too. Time to make a few negotiations because things are working for you. You have the upper hand. People are listening to you. This is a time when, even for relationships, your charm can take you very far. So, time to get your way via other people. Virgo, you need to step back a little bit in some of the things that you're doing because you are producing a bit of conflict and perhaps a bit of disappointment. In fact, you could even be your own worst enemy at the moment. So you need to go a little bit more quiet and take a little few steps back and rather think strategically and think long term. And it's not so important that you get your say at this particular time. So that quiet approach is a strategy and is going to help you get your way or get to your goals in the longer run. In your personal relationships, the same is not true. This is a time for talking. This is a time you will be heard. This is a time for understanding and sharing. So maybe the message of your chart this month, Virgo, is to concentrate more on your personal life, concentrate more on the relationship, and the stuff about yourself and the stuff about your goals needs to take a bit of a backseat. Librans, you might find yourself a little bit in reaction mode this month. It's as if everything's affecting you. So you're a little bit oversensitive, but that sounds like a bad thing, and it isn't. This is a month where you can tune and refine that sensitivity to your advantage. Your intuition is on top form. You're picking up all the useful things you need to know from the people around you, and that can really be helpful in terms of all your relationships and your interrelations with people, from the personal to the professional. So this is a great time to start thinking of what do I need to do in terms of both partnerships with other people as well as what I need from other people. This is a time when doors will open more easily for you if you are keeping your ear to the ground and listening to your intuition. And most importantly, guarding against overreaction. Don't let overreaction be too much of a good thing when it comes to sensitivity. The sensitivity should work for you. Scorpio, this looks like a good month for you financially, at least in terms of the money coming in. What's not so good about this month financially is that your spending urge seems to be very strong. In fact, I could even say this month, money is kind of burning a hole in your pocket. And one of your big challenges is to control it in some way. Your own weaknesses can come and hurt you, not only in terms of succumbing to the indulgence of spending some of that money, but also wanting to help someone or some cause or something like that, which is a great impulse, but you've got to be careful not to injure yourself in the process of helping someone else, whether that's financially or in some other way. That's what you've got to think about this month. Most importantly, this is a month where if you control and stop yourself from doing that spending, your financial resources could really look a lot better in a month's time. Sagittarius, it's a month of laying low for you as well, or just, your version of that might be going off on your own somewhere, which might be possible for you to do. But the important thing is that this is not a time to assert your goals or push yourself out there in some way. It's a little bit stay behind the scenes, hang back a little bit, and also because things aren't going to work quite the way you want. What you're expecting from people or what you need from people doesn't seem to be likely to happen. So you need to take a bit of a strategic break. And instead of kind of bashing your head against the wall, this is a time to realize, take a bit of a break, concentrate on myself, go off on my own, do my own personal projects, come back into what do I need from other people and how am I getting that from other people in a month or so's time. It could be also a good time as investment where you don't see results now, but results are coming in the future. So hang in there for things that you can invest in. Capricorn, it looks like your chores month has arrived. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of your energy needs to go. This is the time to be doing all the spring cleaning that doesn't happen in spring, where you can really perhaps do the hard work, whether that's maintenance, whether it's the thankless cleaning that doesn't really do much, like give you new space or anything like that, but still needs to be done. This is that month. Of course, it still does benefit you going forward to have done all of that and to have that behind you in some way. Hard work might also be what's required in your actual working life. This is the month where you're going to have to knuckle down with some things, but also a month to have a look at, where am I overdoing that? This is not a good time for getting yourself trapped into chores or tasks that are actually not something that you need to be doing, that you should be delegating, or that you should actually just put aside completely. So be careful not to get yourself into servant mode, but do what needs to be done to get your house in order. Aquarius, you need to give yourself a bit of a creative shakeup at this time. It's like whether they're creative projects or other pet projects are either not receiving enough of your time, or you're in a rut or a loop and you've narrowed your vision and you can't see the wood for the trees. So it's time for a bit of a shakeup, different kind of input, different kind of activities, different resources to use for what normally works for you. In fact, your chart actually says there are unusual resources or difficult to find resources that are available to you at this time. You just got to kind of do the detective work and go out there and find what can work for me now that really helps me break this impasse or break through in some kind of a way. There's great for potential for creative breakthrough or project breakthrough. Remember, personal projects are the main thing I'm talking about, but it does need that detective work in order for it to happen, to find something or someone not usually available to you that's going to make all the difference. Pisces, you're another one of the signs that probably wants to lay a bit low this month because there's just way too much going on. Your natural route is the escape route, and you might find yourself really itching to take that route. As long as there's no negative consequences, that won't be such a bad idea, but you don't want to run away completely. This is really a time to ask yourself, how can I serve myself better? And also, what is really required of me by the people around me? Because it looks like you're getting yourself into too many commitments or getting too caught up in stuff that you don't really want to do or shouldn't be doing. And you need to kind of extricate yourself from some of that. Be careful that your ideals and dreams don't get you caught up into slaving away for someone else's ideas and dreams and not getting your own done. So asking yourself, how can I serve myself? How can I balance my responsibilities to myself with my responsibilities to other people? And what are really my responsibilities to other people? Can I be sure that it still benefits me to carry that responsibility and it isn't just about them getting their goals done?